Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of this podcast. Today my special guest is Dr. T. Paul Thomas. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Thank you for accepting the invitation first of all. And for everyone who is listening to this episode, T. Paul is my professor of the Management 405 class here in NAU. And his classes were super interesting. And since the first day, I invited him to record the podcast. So thank you again for accepting. Before starting this conversation, I would like to ask you about how is your background? What did you do before becoming a professor? What's behind the scenes?
Yeah. So first of all, I actually attended NAU, and when I graduated, I had a degree in finance, and first went into banking, and then eventually got to the point where I was in a tech company and was offered an opportunity to be a CEO of the company that at the time was a publicly traded company. And so from that point on, I spent 30 years doing tech startups, primarily software, hardware, technical companies. And I was fortunate to have run companies in India, China, Japan, all over Europe, the United States. And about 9 years ago, sold my last company and decided to retire to Flagstaff and was offered an opportunity to teach from a practitioner standpoint.
Okay, that's cool. And what was the first job that you ever had?
As in ever in life or after college?
Yeah, in life.
I delivered newspapers.
I'm just gonna approach it a little more.
I was 10 years old, and I had a newspaper route where I delivered newspapers in my neighborhood. Yeah.
And when you graduated from NAU, what was your first job?
First job out of NAU was with a bank that was called Great Western Bank, and it's now Wells Fargo. And I was hired to be a commercial banker.
Okay. And I kept checking your link. I was checking your LinkedIn profile, and I saw you are that you were the CEO and president of many companies. How did you become the CEO and the president of all those companies? I know there was a lot of preparation behind.
There wasn't a lot of preparation.
Oh, no?
The first one always is somebody taking a chance on you, and so I had an opportunity to go into a company as a general manager and head of one of the divisions. And shortly after I joined the company, the board of directors terminated the CEO and approached me to ask me would I be interested in being the CEO of the company. And once you have a couple successful CEO jobs, if you're able to either increase the stock price or help have a liquidity event selling the company off, then you get a reputation for doing it.
Okay.
And I was fortunate in that I had 3 venture capital firms that invested in my early companies. And so when I would sell the company or merge it, then they would ask me to come in and take on another one. So it got to the point where I was somewhat of an expert at turnarounds.
Okay. And I know you have had a lot of jobs, and I mean I'm only 22 years old, and all the jobs that I have had are work study positions. Sometimes some of them are temporary work study positions. My longest one has been probably for 4 semesters, and then I had to terminate because I transferred to NAU. And I remember that one time when I was just posting quotes and phrases in my social media, I said that it's okay to change from one job to another, because we're not gonna live 500 years, and if we get an opportunity, we have to take it. And sometimes we have to think more about ourselves rather than thinking about everybody else's opinion. And I remember that when I posted that, many people were telling me I was wrong, that I was wrong, and I was okay, but so far it has worked. And when I was checking your profile, I mean, you have way more experience than me, obviously, and I saw you have been part of many different positions. I would like to know a standpoint of this?
So, because of the nature of the work that I did, it was about kind of doing turnarounds. It was about coming in and making quick assessments of, is this worth additional investment? Should we sell it? Should we try to find somebody to acquire it? So the nature of the business was such that most of my tenures at any given job was about 18 months. Part of that is just my nature. I'm not a maintain person. I'm a person who likes to come in, find some challenge, fix it, and then move on to the next thing that needs to be fixed. But I think it's not always great to have a reputation of being a job hopper. It's the story behind it. And so if you're able to say why you only stayed 18 months or why you're only at 2 years. But I also think that times have changed. Our parents stayed at the same company for 30 years. And the idea of only staying for 18 months is something that's odd to them. But I would tell anybody that you're responsible for your own career, and if you're not being challenged, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, there are so many other opportunities out there. So go to what you enjoy.
Did you ever had a job that you didn't like and you quit because of that?
So I had and it was actually the highest paying job I have ever had. I hated it, and I accepted it because they offered me so much money.
Okay.
And I hated every day. And eventually, I left. And that's when I learned that it's not about money. There's so much more than just money.
What advice would you give to someone who is just starting, like, let's say, or my generation, like these students who are just about to graduate college or those who just graduated?
Yeah, and I always tell my students this: your first job out of school, you should try to stay at least 18 months, even if you don't like it. And so, which is all the more reason to make sure you take the time to find the right job. So don't take the first offer that you get or the highest cash, the highest compensation. Make sure that you look into it and say, is this a company I can stay at for at least 18 months? And then take that opportunity to learn everything you can around leadership, around working with teams, around customer service. And then once you have 18 months to 24 months, then I think it's a time then you can go ahead and change. The exception is if if it's not what was promised, if you're being abused, but try to stick it out for 18 months.
Yeah, and I remember that when we were in class, I think probably last week or 2 weeks ago, you mentioned that you had worked in Disney. Can you tell me about that experience?
So I didn't work for Disney. I was working for a game development company in India. And what we had to do is we had to license all of our images. And so I worked with Disney in their licensing group and in their internet group, and got to see everything that happens at Disney. But I was never actually a Disney employee or a cast member.
But did you get to meet like many important people from Disney, I would say?
Yeah, one of the days that I had a meeting there to go over the licensing, we just went to the employee cafeteria, and Michael Eisner was there. Not Michael Eisner, the president after Michael Eisner. His name slips my mind.
No
but
worries.
he was the CEO was sitting right at the table next to me.
And how does it feel like to get to talk to these super important people? Because, for example, like even me, like when I get to talk to, let's say, a professional baseball player, because I'm a baseball fan and I play baseball, it's like, oh wow, like I see them like super at the top. And sometimes, I know, I remember that I recorded a podcast with this professional baseball player last year, and I was super nervous when I was interviewing him because I was like, I can't believe like I'm talking to him. Like, how did it feel for you?
I guess I've been fortunate in that I've worked for great companies, and I've met a lot of people that were famous.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I've found is that they're always nice.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that aren't nice really aren't that famous, or they're not that. And so, I've never... I guess the one exception was Barry Bonds, who is the baseball player.
The home run leader.
Exactly. And so I was at the San Francisco airport and saw him, that he was going to be on the same flight that I was going to go on. And so I went into the gift shop and bought a baseball. There was a baseball in the gift shop, and then I walked over to him with a pen and the baseball, and I said, Mr. Bonds, can I get you to sign this? And all of a sudden I got really nervous about it, and my hand was shaking as I was like, so that's the only time. Like I said, and mostly it was just because he was kind of mean. And whereas most other people I've found, they're always really nice.
Yeah. Did he sign it?
He did, but he never looked at me. And
really?
Yeah, he kind of had his head down and was making comments, and then he just handed it to me. And
so you're a baseball fan as well?
When I used to live in the Bay Area, we had season tickets to the Oakland A's,
mm-hmm.
so I was an Oakland fan.
That's cool.
Not a Giants fan. So.
Did you get to see play Jose Canseco?
I did, because we probably over a 20-year period have lived in and out of the Bay Area, so I got to see a lot of the A's.
There was a Mexican baseball player actually in the Oakland Athletics A's, and his name is Erubiel Durazo. I don't know if you heard about him.
Mm-mm.
I think he plays in around 2003, 2004.
So we were there.
I don't remember if he started with the A's or with the D-backs, and then he switched, but he played for these two teams.
Okay, yeah. No, I don't.
Yeah. He was playing in 2001 with the D-backs because then they won against the Yankees in 2001.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. And then you also mentioned that you were working at Apple, right?
Yep.
And that you were the senior director of marketing, right?
Yep.
And how was that? Like, how was your experience of working right now? Like, I think it's the most important company of the world, or probably like Amazon or Apple are like in the top right now.
So when I was at Apple, it was not the Apple that it is today.
Okay.
So when I worked at Apple, there was not the iPhone, there was not the Apple Watch, there was not even the iPod, the iPad. So at the time, Apple was just a computer company and a software company.
Okay.
And I was hired. Well, if you go back, it used to be that the only place you could buy computers were from computer authorized dealers. You couldn't buy them on the internet. You couldn't go into Best Buy in
what year was that?
So this was in the mid '90s.
Okay.
And so Apple had made the decision that they were going to change their distribution. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was working for Compaq Computer in Houston and was responsible for all of distribution marketing. And we had opened up distribution to more than just dealers. So Apple asked me to come in and do the same thing. And so it was a bad time for Apple. The stock price at one point got below $10 a share, and there was talk that we were going to go out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was an interesting time. But of all the companies I've ever worked at, Apple was probably the most fun. The cafeterias had beer on tap, and it was just a great place to work.
Super good place to work.
Yeah.
You mentioned one time, it was on one-on-one conversation, you didn't mention it in a class, that you got to see Steve Jobs, but it was a time when he had been fired from Apple, and then during this period you were there, and then when you quit Apple, it was a time when he came back, right?
Right.
But you mentioned that that you got to meet him, right? Can you tell me more about it? Like, how was that?
So it's like I was saying earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you meet famous people and they just put you at ease, and they're just very humble.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are other people who do not put you at ease, and it's almost like the Barry Bonds thing. I understand that he's famous and everybody wants to be by him, so I understand why maybe he doesn't like that.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs was very much that way.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a person who would care about you personally or your family, or but you can't argue with the fact that he was brilliant.
Yeah.
And so I've been fortunate to have worked with people like that. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this fine line between brilliance and being insane.
Yeah.
And so he's not a person that I would want to hang out with.
Yeah, I understand.
But you can't dispute the fact that he's a marketing genius.
Mm-hmm. And from the business and from the marketing perspective, what would you say that are the most important things that you learned when you were working in Apple? Because at that time, marketing was done in a super different way, right?
Yeah. I think the importance of really understanding what your customers want, mm-hmm. because sometimes there's this perception that, we have to market this way, yet you don't reach your target audience.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, and Steve Jobs was brilliant when it came to this, people don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. So if I were to go to you and say, listen, what features would you like in the next computer? Well, you don't know what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you can't listen to the customer. Sometimes you have to try to say, I believe that we have the ability to do this, and we just need to do it and see if it works. The other thing I think from a marketing standpoint is know when to pull the plug on something. I've seen where you keep trying to change things, or you keep trying to do something different with the company, and eventually you just come to the realization its life is over and it's time to end it.
Right now, marketing is done in a super different way, because Apple right now is one of the best companies in the world. What are the strategies that you think that Apple is implementing right now? Even though if I don't see any Apple ad, I know what Apple means. Right? So what is the marketing that they do right now? Because probably let's say that you don't have an iPhone, or that I don't have an iPhone, and if I go to a shop, I would probably want the iPhone. Right?
Yeah. So the honest answer is I don't know.
Okay.
But you're right. It's to the point. All I use are Macs. My phone is the iPhone. I have an Apple Watch, and I would never think of using anything else.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with the marketing. It has everything to do with, I just know that it's going to work.
Yeah.
And I also know that they have a high level of customer service.
That's true, because that one time that I called Apple, it was when I just bought this phone that we're using to record, and it was delayed probably for 2 or 3 days, and then I called, and I remember it was the best customer service. Wow. And I have called Amazon 2 times, and I would say the customer service was awesome as well. So it's now I understand why they are in that top.
Yeah.
right? And one time, we were in class, and at the end, I approached you, and you told me that you created, or you and your company created, the software that right now is called Google Earth, right? Can you tell me more about it, please?
So it's I was hired into a company that was called Intrinsic Graphics. Intrinsic Graphics was a company that was founded by 4 engineers from SGI. They were brilliant engineers, had worked on a lot of satellite technology, a lot of visual graphics. And what they did is they created a product that allowed game developers to develop a game on a single platform. So for instance, if you're Activision or you're EA Sports, you have to develop all your games on each platform. There's a team that does PlayStation, there's a team that does Xbox, and we developed a platform that allowed you to develop the game on the one platform, and then it would work on any hardware.
Okay.
So it's kind of a hard thing to describe and try to explain to somebody the technology involved in making that happen. So what we did is we created a product that we called Earth Viewer, and we took satellite and aerial photographs and put them seamlessly into this database. And we used that to demonstrate how good we were at graphics. And so when we would meet with an investor, we would say, give us an address. And then we would punch in the address, and then we would come in and zoom in on their house or their office or whatever it was. So everybody loved it. But interesting enough, our key investors thought it was a waste of time and a distraction to what was our core product, this working with game developers. So they said to us, you need to spin off, you need to go hire a team to work on this Earth Viewer so that you can focus on the core product. Which was called Intrinsic Alchemy. And so we did. We actually we rented some space in the building next to us and got a team and said, you need to keep working on this Earth Viewer. What ended up happening is Earth Viewer ended up being the thing that everybody wanted. And eventually it got to the point where, one, because we were running out of money, we approached Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, and said that we were interested in selling. At the time, some of the investors in Earth Viewer looked at it and saw the huge potential that it was there. And one thing led to another, and we ended up that Google was the high bidder, and now the rest is history. You look at Google Earth, Google Maps, which is part of the same, or Street View, which is part of the same technology. So what Google did, as part of them buying it, they wanted to interview everybody and decide who they wanted to hire, and we told them, if you're buying the company, you take all the employees.
Yeah.
And so everybody that wanted to go over to Google went over to Google. And so
that's super cool. How does it feel like to having created it?
Oh, it's great. It's we got pre-IPO stock in the purchase, and so a lot of the employees are now multi-millionaires.
That's cool.
As a result of it, and so it was awesome, especially because at the time we were struggling financially, yet you have employees who still stick it out because they're loyal to the company, and so it's great to see those employees be able to now retire and buy an island somewhere and have multiple spouses or
Can you
whatever.
say for how much you sold that, or it's private information?
It was private, and it was all
okay.
pre-IPO stock,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a lot.
Millions.
Oh, it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's super cool. And you also said, like, I mean, the class that I'm taking with you is about of like international management, and you can mention like that you have traveled like all the world, like the continent. You have talked about when you were in Africa, in India, like a lot of places. Which jobs gave you the opportunity to travel like a lot, or how did you make it happen?
I would say all of them. Every CEO job I had, one of them, when I was the CEO of Turbo Linux, we had offices in 15 countries, so I was always traveling to those places. But I think in this day and age, every job, every company is an international company, and so I got to travel international with every single one of them.
That's very cool. Was it hard, like at the beginning, like because you have mentioned in class, like when it comes to adapt to a new culture, like the traditions and everything? Did you used to go to those countries like super well prepared, or you were like figuring out like along the way?
So it depends. Sometimes you just have to fly over. Like I'll give an example. At one point, the company, the Intrinsic Graphics company, Sony was interested in acquiring us.
Mm-hmm.
We were working closely with them on the PlayStation, and they liked some of the technology we were using. And I got a call on a Monday saying that the president of the PlayStation group wanted to have dinner with me on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And so I quickly got a flight, flew over. We had dinner.
To where?
To Tokyo.
Okay.
And we had dinner, and then the next morning I flew back.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of the times there's these quick... the other thing, and I've talked about this in class, you get to a place, but you don't get to see outside. You're in your hotel, or you're in the company's offices. But I at least made it a point to know something about the culture, to know something about the history, to know something about the city that I was in, and obviously to know about the company. But unfortunately, you rarely get to spend any time out seeing things.
Yeah, my dad used to tell me about it because he used to travel a lot. So he lives in North Mexico, and he used to travel a lot to Cancun, but just for Pfizer conventions.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's super cool that you're going to Cancun. And he's like, no, it's literally just go to a hotel. The rooms are in the hotel, like, I mean, the conference rooms.
Yeah.
So it's like, and when I'm out, I have to study for the next day. So it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And for example, like in this situation, when you have to travel, when you had to travel from here to Tokyo, who pays that trip? Your company or the PlayStation company?
Oh no, it's always your company.
Oh, it's always your company.
Yeah. The any of your travel, even if it was to try to talk to somebody about a potential acquisition or a merger, it's your
company always pay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to a little plus because it only allows me to work recording segments. Okay. So you also mentioned to me one time, I think it was last week, that your best friend's office is next to Larry Page's office, right?
Right.
How was that like? Did you get to meet like Larry Page at some point?
Yeah, and so this is I told you there were the 4 engineers who from SGI started the company, and the lead founder, his name is Michael Jones. Michael has all the patents for Google Earth, and so when he went over to Google as part of our sale, he became the chief technology advocate for Google. And He was part of the executive staff,
Mm-hmm.
so he worked hand in hand with Eric Schmidt, who was the CEO for a long time, and then obviously with Larry and Sergey. And so the interesting thing about Google is nobody has their own office. Everybody shares an office with somebody.
Okay.
They look at it as kind of like in college, how if you're with a roommate, there's ideas that are going back and forth.
Yeah.
And so, and nobody has big offices. They're all small
Oh,
offices.
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, they're all small. And the reason they do that is to try to encourage you to leave your office and go to the common areas where there's lots of activity going on. Michael's office was literally between Eric Schmidt and then Larry and Sergey. And so, one, they're rarely there. But like I was saying about, famous people, they're like so nice.
Yeah.
But part of that was because of Michael. Everyone loved Michael. So.
That's super cool. Did you get to work at Google at some point or not?
No, never did. As a result of having sold one company,
Mm-hmm.
then other companies would come to me and say, "Hey, can you help us talk?" And because Michael was my best friend, I got to spend a lot of time
Mm-hmm.
there. And I would always say, "Hey, listen, I've got this company. I think it's interesting. Can we come over?"
Mm-hmm.
And then Michael would be on all my boards
Yeah.
as I would go out and tell the
How
company.
easy is to get for you, or how easy it was for you, like when it got, like, for example, to tag from one company, let's say your company, to another super famous company like Sony, PlayStation? How easy or how hard it was to get to the higher ups?
So you get to the highest level that you need to be. So obviously, if I was in conversations about acquiring a company or merging with a company, you deal with that the highest level. If you're just looking to maybe sell off a division or a product, you meet with the head of that other unit. So I think the thing that's important is make sure that you're meeting with the right level, but don't make it a point to say, "Oh, I have to talk to the CEO," because it may not be required. I sold a business unit to IBM, and I spent the entire time talking to a business unit manager. I never went anywhere higher than that, but it didn't need to be.
Okay.
So
Because I'm thinking right now, like, for example, let's say that I want to create like an app, a product, whatever, and I'm like, okay, so I need to talk to one of the higher ups, let's say, for example, like for an acquisition, and it's like, I'm gonna send an email, I'm gonna make a phone call, but the person who answers the phone call to reply the emails probably is not gonna help me through get to that person. That was the reason why I was asking.
yeah, and I think sometimes people think that we CEOs do more than what we do, and when in fact, even in an acquisition at Google, that's not something that Larry and Sergey would get involved with.
Okay.
And so even if somehow you're on a flight and it's your company is awesome and you know that Google would love to have it. If you're sitting next to Larry or Sergey and said, "Hey, I've got this," they'd say, "Oh, that sounds interesting. I'll have you talk to whoever."
So with what kind of stuff do they deal?
Anything that has to do with data.
Okay.
So I was in another company where what we did is we helped the idea of hotels having concierge, we came up with more of a technology version of it, so that you could go to this screen in the lobby and you would be able to say, where's the closest Italian restaurant? Mm-hmm. And what it would do is it would pop up and it would tell you this about the restaurant, give you the reviews, much like you would do anyways, whether with Yelp or whatever. But all the data was sourced locally. Mm-hmm. So rather than, we would actually get data from the local markets to put into this system. So at one point we went to Google and said, are you interested in buying this company? And so their interest was, how many points of data do you have? How many cities do you have data on? And how many engineers do you have? And so if you went to them and said, I have a great product and I just want to get rich, so please buy my company, they're not really interested in that. They're interested in you saying, if I had more investment, I could really grow and achieve my dream of expanding and this. But they're interested in data, any data that you can provide, and they're interested in engineers.
Yeah, you mentioned something like I have seen in the Shark Tank program, like when the sharks ask the entrepreneur, like, hey, so if I invest in this company, like, what do you want, or where do you see your company like in 10 years? And when the entrepreneurs answer like, oh, I want to sell my company, they're like, so you're not like really interested in your own company, so why should I be interested in that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's I think with all the startups that I've done, if your goal is to just sell it, mm-hmm. then you're going to have a tough time.
Because you're working for money and not for passion, right?
Exactly. And so I think it's one of those things where you want to get in. So for instance, Michael Jones, when he was interviewing me for the CEO, I would always do this. I would always ask the founders, what would you like to have happen? And he told me a story about how he was the odd kid in grade school who never went out to the playground. He always stayed in the classroom and he would play with the globe. And he said he would spin the globe and then he'd put his finger and stop it. And he would wonder, are there other kids that are weird like me? And so he told me his goal was to have Earth Viewer, now Google Earth, available to every student around the world.
Okay.
So he wanted every student to have access to a digital globe.
Uh-huh.
And so it was never about money. It was never about fame.
We have it now, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
One of the most important things that I'm super interested about, that I ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of people this question. It's about networking. I love to network with people. I love to get to know, like, for example, like, I invited you to my podcast because, as I told you in class, I want to learn from your experiences. And I always ask, like, other people about how they network. And I want to ask you this question, like, how do you network with people? Like, what are your strategies, or, yeah?
So I think the thing that's important is that you be able to, that there's value both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, one of the things that I used to do, whenever I would go into a new company as the CEO, I would reach out to the CEOs of all of my competitors. Mm-hmm. And I would say, hey, I'm going to be in your city. I'd like to buy you lunch. So there's value there. Mm-hmm. They know that I'm a competitor, but they also know we're in the same space. Mm-hmm. And so they look at it and say, all right, I'll do this. And it always resulted in something good. On the flip side, if I reached out to some completely unrelated industry and some CEO and I said, hey, I'm going to be in your town, can I buy you lunch? I think they're going to go, why? Who are you?
Yeah.
And I'm really busy. the interesting thing in having reached out to all of my competitors of all my different companies, I only had one person ever decline.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and and I've had nothing but positives come out of them. Sometimes it resulted in selling the company. Sometimes it resulted in acquiring a company. Sometimes it resulted in just having a contact that I could call and say, hey, just want to give you a heads up, this is happening and you should be aware of it.
Isn't it weird, like, or does it go like against your company's like policies or anything, like to hang out with your competitor? Because I'm thinking, like, for example, like it's a random conversation, it's at lunch, and you ask a question or he asks a question, and what if the answer is confidential information?
But what would be confidential? You know,
I don't know.
So there's a couple key things. Don't ask anything that you truly aren't trying to, so say you're a competitor and we're at lunch. I'm not going to say to you, how many employees do you have? Because
it just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. So you're gonna go what? That's it. Now, what I may say is, with this COVID thing, we've actually seen an increase in revenue. Have you seen that same thing? But I'm not going to say to him, how much revenue do you have?
Okay.
And so it really has to be sort of out of interest, and I have to be willing to share.
Yeah.
So if I just said, I know COVID's really hit some companies, how's it impacted you? Instead I say, we've done well with COVID, actually have seen a little bit of an increase, have you as well? Now, they may say, nah, I'd rather not get into that, I'd rather not say.
Okay.
But you also get a sense from people, are they there just to try to dig up
You
things?
can feel the vibe, right?
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting, like, and because, for example, like, I'm thinking about, like, baseball in this situation, and I remember that my dad one time told me, never tell your friends, because we were all friends, like, in the little leagues, and my dad told me, never tell your friends with which pitch you struggle the most when you hit, because even though you're friends, like, when they pitch you, they are gonna remember, oh, I'm gonna throw loose a changeup, I'm gonna throw loose a slider or something. But for example, like, when we were, like, getting older, I remember that I was probably 16, 17. This guy was a pitcher and he was throwing like 88, 89 miles per hour, and I was only like in my 83, 84, and he helped me like a lot, like with everything, like physical conditioning, grips of the ball, a lot of stuff. But at the same time, like, I got to meet like other people, like other players who never wanted to share like the keys of their success, like when it comes to pitching, hitting, conditioning, whatever. But it's like, why? Like, we are not like competitors at this time. We can probably be competitors when we get to the majors or to another league, but.
And the other thing I would say is, everybody's a little bit different. A company that I was running in Ireland, we collected data, much like LinkedIn. We collected data on everybody. And there's another company that does the same thing, except their focus is about net worth.
Okay.
So they collect data on what is the net worth, what are the things that they focus on that they're likely to donate to. So it was different because we didn't collect that data. Ours was more about the business side and who knew who. And so I went and I had a meeting with them, and we talked about what they collected. We talked about what we collected, and we saw that there was lots of synergy if you could put those two lists together. And so I guess that's what I've seen. I had a company that we did event planning, and our focus were hospitals and universities. And it was all about planning space, setting up space, catering. And we ended up merging with a company who did corporate and businesses. So they did very little hospitals. They did very little in the way of universities. And so we both did the same thing, but we had different markets.
Okay. When it comes, for example, to negotiations, like I'm pretty sure, yeah, I am pretty sure that throughout your career you had to make a lot of actual negotiations that involved probably like a lot of money. How do you learn to negotiate? Because right now, like I'm thinking, and I think that I have never taken a class that involves actual negotiations. Probably about selling stuff. I took a class last semester and this semester as well. But when it comes to negotiation, what are your keys, or how do you learn to do that?
So first of all, am I buying something or are you selling me something? So if I come to you and I say, I want to buy your car, and you haven't even thought about, you're going to have a high price because you're going to go, well, I had never even thought about selling it, but if you really want it, I have a price. If you're selling the car and I go to you, I'm in a little bit better of a situation. And so the first thing that I would always want to find out is, are you interested in doing something? And if they said, no, I'm really not, but if you pay me enough, that's going to be a really tough, like if I go to you and I say, I want to buy your car, and you're like, oh, it's not for sale. And I go, but I really want it. You're going to go, well, then you're going to pay me a lot. So the first thing is, do they really want to sell? The other thing is, do they see value in having their organization become part of mine? So if I'm Google and I go to you and I go, listen, we're really interested, you would look at that and go, that's awesome. And if I can be able to say, Google bought my company. So there's value to you in that. If I'm some, garbage company, you're like, I don't really want my company to be associated with your, but it's not really that hard. Once you find out if they're interested in doing something, like I remember I had a Linux company and I was in negotiation to merge with another. So they started off saying, well, you have this revenue, we have this revenue, you have this cash, we have this cash, we have this, we have that. We think it should be 40-60, or we think it should be this. And I remember one of my investors said, it's a 50-50 deal. It doesn't matter what each one has, because if it did, then why are we doing this? We're doing it because we believe we need to be together in order to be successful. So by putting the two together, the value 10 years from now is going to be so much greater than the two individual ones. So you have things like that. But again, I don't think it's hard. I think you just tend to kind of walk through and talk through things. And the other thing that you learn is, if you're selling it, you always have all the reasons that it's worth more. If I'm buying it, I have all the reasons why it's worth less.
Interesting, Interesting.
Yeah.
When it comes, for example, like to negotiating a salary, because I remember, like, Len Hofstadter, right? He was mentioning in one of his classes that if we ever need help about, salary negotiation, like, oh, just come to my office. And I'm like, I would probably go, because I actually already went, but it was for a resume. He was going to review and edit my resume, and then I would probably go later, because I asked him like for negotiating, not a salary, but it's kind of like that. It's like a scholarship combined to salary, something like that. So how would you do that? Like, or did you get to negotiate a salary, or people who negotiated their salary with you?
Yeah. So I don't think there's as much room as people think that there is, but especially like right out of college, let's say you're an accounting major and you're going to go to one of the big 4 accounting firms. Whatever they offer you is exactly what the other 3 are offering. Okay. And if you say, hey, listen, I have an offer from this other firm for this much, if they may ask to verify it, and then they may say, we'll match that. I can tell you that as I would hire executives for my team, I would say to them, listen, I'm not about negotiating. This is what I can pay. And so if they would say, well, I was really hoping for more, so I'd say, it is what it is, and I'm being fair to you. This is now what you could sometimes negotiate is maybe more vacation or some kind of a bonus.
Like paid vacation?
Yeah,
Okay.
paid vacation or maybe some sort of flex time or something. But I've rarely, especially as a CEO, they lay it out. They know what the market is, and it's usually other things that you can ask for.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned a while ago during this episode, it was when you were working at Apple, and I just forgot to ask you about the Apple logo protection that you mentioned in class, because you said that Apple was really protecting that logo because it was patent, right?
Yeah,
So,
copyrighted. Yeah.
Copyrighted,
Yeah.
yeah. And why would they be super concerned about it if they already have the patent?
Let's say that you so back at the time, again, we just did software and hardware, and so if you had a computer, and this happened, I was in New York, and somebody had on their store an Apple logo, and they said they were an Apple service center. So if you, unknowing, have a problem with your computer, and you go, oh, well, that's an Apple service center, I'm going to take it there, when in fact it was not. And if somehow they mess up your computer, you're going to say, Apple messed up my computer, when in fact they were not authorized. And so I remember I was traveling with our corporate attorney, and he took down the address, and he made a phone call, and he said, you need to send a letter, tell them they need to cease and desist using our logo on their location.
Oh, wow. It doesn't happen that often right now, or is it still happening?
Oh, I doubt that it happens that much now. Probably international more.
Oh, yeah.
I remember I went to a mall in Africa, and there was a store that looked exactly like an Apple store. I mean, the way the displays were, the way the art was, and there's no way it was an Apple store.
Yeah. And that copyright is does it include all the countries of the world, or first you have to copyright it in your country and then?
It depends, but a lot of times you have to go into other countries as well. And so that's why sometimes what people will do is they'll see a brand and they'll think it's an up and coming brand, and then they'll they'll buy the URL so that way when it's famous, you have to pay them to get it for that country.
It happens a lot in Mexico. For example, when it comes to movies, brands of Michael Kors, the brands that women like a lot, for bags and stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's you can go to there's not a mall, I don't know how to call it in English, and next to that stadium, it's a kind of poor middle class neighborhood, and people are literally just selling movies that are in the theaters.
Oh, yeah.
And it's obvious that it's not original, but people still buy them, and it's it's illegal, obviously, but no one does anything apparently.
Yeah.
You went to Mexico to work at some point?
Yeah. Early in my career, I was with a franchise organization. It was called Microage, and in Southern California, in San Diego, we had a couple stores, but they were owned by a family in Mexico, and so I would go down there to work with them. I have never been in a CEO role in a company in Mexico. I've had none. I've had divisions, but was not directly involved where I would go down.
Oh, okay. Give me a second. Okay, and what's coming like right now for your life? Because you mentioned that you are retired. Like right now, like, you're working as a professor here in NAU. Why did you decide to work after retiring?
Um, so besides teaching, I still mentor and help startups.
Mm-hmm.
I still sit on boards to help companies, and I think I'll do that as long as I can be helpful.
Is it like a hobby?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a hobby. It keeps me busy.
Yeah.
The other thing that it does, it keeps me involved in business, and then I can use that in my lectures.
That's true.
Because the real value I bring is not me, it's that I can tell stories because I've seen all these things.
Uh-huh.
And so I've been teaching now for 9 years. I can't keep using my stories from when I ran companies because that's 9 years ago.
Yeah.
So by staying involved with startups and being on boards, I still get exposed to things that are happening.
Mm-hmm. And you're very involved, like here in Northern Arizona, right? Because I was checking in your LinkedIn profile that you something related to NASET, right?
Yeah.
And I was in an internship or like an extra course that was provided by Moonshot at NASET.
Yeah.
And it was Scott Hathcock. You probably know him.
Yeah.
He was the one who was teaching us those lectures.
Yeah. So before Scott was there was a woman named Annette Zinke who ran NASET. And she came to me when I first started teaching here
Mm-hmm.
and asked me if I would be the executive in resident, the chief entrepreneur. And so I helped all the startups and student groups that came through NASET. And then she left, and then Scott took over, and then he changed the name to Moonshot. And
Mm-hmm.
So I was the chief entrepreneur up until 2 years ago there.
Okay. Well, like right now that we're about to finish this episode, but I want to ask you like another question. Like, what are your biggest success? What have been your biggest successes in your life and the biggest like failures in the professional life?
Yeah. I don't know, and
Or what you have liked the most, or something like that.
So, I guess the thing I'm most proud of are my 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And my 3 kids grew up with me moving.
Mm-hmm.
We moved a lot. My daughter, when she did her essay for college, talked about having moved 16 times in her 18 years
Wow.
of life. And all 3 of my kids have grown up and have successful careers. And so I think that's awesome. Another one that most people think it's funny or think I'm joking was I was an Eagle Scout.
A what?
An Eagle Scout in Boy Scouts.
Okay.
And the reason it was important to me is it involves lots of things you have to do by yourself, but it also involves things that you have to be able to do with a group.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn life skills. And they were skills that, that helped me. I put myself through college. So all of the companies that I've had, I've taken companies public, I've sold companies, I've bought companies, but that only happened because of having a great team. And
Yeah.
It wasn't me. There was lots of luck that kind of played into it. It's not any of the company things.
When you were just starting and you were like seeing like a lot of money, like negotiation, budgets and stuff, were you nervous about it? Because like, if I need to manage like a lot of money right now, I'm gonna be like, what if I mess it up? And it's not even my money. It's one of my fears, I would say, probably.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely better at managing other people's money. And I learned that, like if I was running a company and you were an investor, I would if it got to the point where I said, listen, don't put any more money in this. We can't fix it, or it can't be fixed, or it's end of life. And several years, 10 years ago, that was more than that, I bought a aviation business because I was flying, and I looked at it and thought, well, I've run much bigger companies, I can run this company. And I just kept throwing money at it. And I realized if I was running it for somebody else, I would have told them, it's time to stop. Don't keep putting money into this. And but I got too attached to it. And so I think that's the thing. You can't become attached to it. You have to look at it purely from business and not get emotional.
Exactly. Yeah, which is hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, right now, just to finish the episode, I already asked you like a lot of questions, and thank you for answering to all of them. But now is your time to ask me questions, 2 or 3 questions that you want me to ask.
So,
I hope those ones are not that hard. But just kidding.
So what is the thing that, if you were to look at all the episodes you've done, what are the 3 top things you've learned from having done these?